I was 3 months married when I found out my whole life had been a stage. Not my marriage, not exactly. Not yet. But the friendship that brought me to that wedding. The woman who stood beside me in a silk dress the color of champagne and held my bouquet while I slid a ring onto my husband's finger. The woman who gave a toast that made 200 people cry. The woman I had trusted more than anyone in the world for 8 years. She was never my friend. She had never been my friend. In the night I found out the truth, I sat on the bathroom floor of the home Marcus and I had just moved into, and I read a message on my phone 17 times because my brain refused to process what my eyes were seeing. I am going to tell you everything. I am going to tell you exactly what she did, exactly how she did it, and exactly what happened when the whole thing finally came apart. But first, I need you to understand something. Because I know what you might be thinking. You might be thinking, how do you not know? How does a person spend 8 years with someone and not see it? I asked myself that same question. Every single day for a very long time. And the answer, the real honest answer, is that some people are extraordinary liars. Not the kind who stumble and make excuses. Not the kind who look away when they lie. The kind who look you directly in the eye. The kind who remember every story they've told you, so they never contradict themselves. The kind who are so warm, so present, so seemingly devoted to you, that your instincts never stand a chance. Cara was that kind. And she had been practicing on me for 8 years. I need to take you back. Not to the beginning of the betrayal, but to the beginning of me. Because that part matters. It matters because of who I was before all of this happened. I was 22 years old when I started at the firm. It was a mid-sized marketing consultancy in the city, the kind of place that felt important without being corporate, exposed brick walls, plants everywhere, a coffee machine that cost more than my first month's rent. I had moved from a small town 4 hours away. I didn't know a single person in that city. I had one suitcase, a box of books, and the very firm belief that I was going to figure it out. I was good at my job almost immediately, which surprised me a little. I had always been the kind of person who worked hard and kept her head down, who said yes to the extra project and stayed late without being asked. I made friends slowly. I was never the person who walked into a room and owned it. I was the person who stood near the wall and listened and laughed when something was genuinely funny and went home and called her mother. So when Cara sat down next to me at a company training session on my 3rd week there, I was not expecting what happened next. She looked at my notebook. I had been color-coding my notes by category, which in retrospect is exactly the kind of thing you do when you are desperately trying to look like you have your life together. And she said, without any introduction at all, "That is the most organized notebook I have ever seen in my life, and I need to sit next to you every single day." And I laughed. An actual real laugh. Not the polite kind I had been giving people for 3 weeks. And that was it. That was Cara. She was everything I wasn't, in the best possible way. She was loud where I was quiet. She was spontaneous, where I planned everything in advance. She walked into rooms like she had been invited specifically, and was doing the room a favor by showing up. She was funny, genuinely, effortlessly funny, the kind of funny that wasn't trying to be. And she was interested in me. That was the thing I remember most from those early months. She wanted to know everything about me. Where I grew up, what my family was like, what I was afraid of, what I wanted. She remembered everything I told her. Months after a conversation, she would bring something back up. Detail about my sister, a thing I'd said about a restaurant I wanted to try, and I would feel seen in a way I hadn't felt in years. By the time we had been working together for 6 months, we were spending most of our free time together. Dinners, weekend trips, long walks where we talked for hours. She was my person. I had never had a person before. I am telling you this because I need you to feel what I felt. I need you to understand that this was not a casual connection. This was the friendship I had waited my whole life for. And I gave it everything I had. There were things. There are always things, in hindsight. Little moments that don't quite fit, that you file away under. Strange, and then forget about because the warmth of someone's presence is more persuasive than a single odd look. The first one happened about 8 months into our friendship. We were at a work happy hour, the kind where everyone gets slightly too honest about things they'd normally keep professional. Someone mentioned a mutual colleague named Daniel, who had briefly dated someone in the office, and how he had a habit of keeping in touch with every woman he'd ever had any feeling for. Cara made a face. Just for a second. It was barely there. But she said, some men do that, they want to keep every option on the shelf even when they've moved on. It's possessive disguised as affection. I remember nodding. I remember thinking it was a sharp observation. I didn't ask her if she was speaking from experience. I should have. The second thing happened about a year into our friendship. I had just started seeing someone, a man I'd met through a work event. Nothing serious, just a few dates, and Cara asked me a lot of questions about him, which I loved. She was always interested in my life. But then she looked him up on social media while we were sitting together, and the expression on her face as she scrolled was not exactly curiosity. It was something more careful than that. What's he do again? She asked. He works in finance, I said. She handed the phone back to me. He seems fine, she said. He seems fine. Not he seems great, or he seems like your type. Fine. I thought nothing of it then. I thought maybe she just wasn't that impressed by him, which honestly was fair because the relationship fizzled out on its own, within months. The third thing, the one I think about the most, happened when I first told Cara about Marcus. We were in her apartment, a Friday night, splitting a bottle of wine. I had been seeing Marcus for about 3 weeks at that point. Not long enough to be sure of anything. Long enough to know something was different. I told her his name. I told her where he worked, that he had grown up in the same city I had grown up in, that we'd met at a mutual friend's housewarming party and talked for 4 hours in a corner of the kitchen while everyone else moved around us like water around stone. Cara went very still. Not dramatically. Just still. And then she said, Marcus what? I told her his last name. And she blinked. Once. And she smiled and said, that's a great name, tell me everything. And I told her everything. And she listened like she always listened, completely, totally. Asking questions. And later, much later, I would understand what that stillness meant. But that night, I just thought she was a little tired. First escalation rung, 8:30-13:00, the message arrives. The message arrived on a Tuesday. 3 months and 11 days after our wedding. Marcus and I had just come back from a grocery run. He was putting things away in the kitchen, singing along badly to something playing from his phone, and I was sitting on the couch with my feet up and my own phone in my hand just scrolling through nothing. The message came from an account I didn't recognize. The username was a string of random letters and numbers. No profile picture. Created recently. I almost didn't open it. I almost scrolled past it the way you scroll past everything that doesn't immediately demand your attention. But something made me stop. Maybe instinct. Maybe the way it sat there, in my inbox looking ordinary while being anything but. I opened it. There were 4 lines. That was all. 4 lines. I think you should know that Cara and your husband were together. Before you met him, not a casual thing, a serious relationship. She knew who he was when she became your friend. I'm sorry. I read it once. I read it again. I put the phone face down on my lap and looked at the wall across. The room and I listened to Marcus singing in the kitchen, and the sound of cabinet doors and the ordinary, safe sounds of a Tuesday evening. And then I picked the phone back up and read it a 3rd time. And a 4th. And my hands were not shaking. I remember that very specifically. My hands were not shaking. My brain had simply gone somewhere quiet and cold, and was looking at the message from a great distance, like it belonged to someone else. I didn't say anything to Marcus. Not that night. Not for a long time. I put the phone in my pocket. I went into the kitchen. I asked him if he wanted to eat soon. He said yes, smiled at me, kissed me on the top of my head the way he always did, and I stood there and smiled back, and something inside me, some very fundamental thing, had already shifted. I didn't sleep that night. I lay there in the dark, and I thought about everything. I thought about Cara. I thought about the day she sat next to me in that training session. I thought about 8 years of friendship. 8 years of birthdays and breakups, and phone calls at midnight. And secrets shared over wine. I thought about the look on her face the night I told her Marcus's name. And for the very first time, that look made a different kind of sense. I did not want it to make that kind of sense. I did not want any of this to be true. But by 4 in the morning, I had made a decision. I was going to find out. Whatever the truth was, I was going to find it. And nothing, not fear, not love, not the weight of 8 years, was going to stop me. I want to be clear about something before I continue. I am not by nature an investigative person. I am not suspicious. I am not distrustful. I have never gone through anyone's phone. I have never hired anyone to follow anyone. I have never been the person who digs. But what I found in the next 72 hours changed my understanding of my own life so completely and so permanently that I sometimes think of it as a before and an after. Before I knew. After I knew. The first thing I did was go back through everything Cara had ever posted online. Not recently, recently meant nothing. I went back years. I started from the very beginning of her public profiles, back when social media was younger, and people posted more freely and no one thought very carefully about what a permanent record looked like. I went back 5 years before I met her. 6. 7. And there, buried under hundreds of posts, in the part of a social media history that no one scrolls to because it requires effort and most people assume nothing important lives there, I found a photo. It was from a New Year's Eve party. Cara was younger, her hair different, a style I'd never seen on her. She was laughing at the camera. And her arm was around a man. The man was smiling. The man was Marcus. I looked at that photo for a very long time. My husband, years before I knew him, his arm around my best friend. At a New Year's Eve party, both of them leaning into each other. The easy physical comfort of people who know each other well. The photo had no caption. It had been liked by several people whose accounts I didn't recognize. I kept scrolling. There were more. Not many. But enough. A birthday dinner, Cara and Marcus and a group of people, Marcus. Seated next to her, their shoulders touching. A summer afternoon somewhere outdoors, just the two of them in that one, and Marcus was looking at her, the way I had seen him look at me, and something in my chest felt like it was being pulled apart. Very slowly. And then the last one. A photo with no faces in it. Just two pairs of hands on a table. Two coffees. The caption was a single word. Goodbye. And the date on that post was 14 months before Cara sat down next to me at that training session. 14 months. I closed the app. I opened it again. I stared at that photo for so long my screen went dark. And I realized something that made me feel like the floor was moving beneath my feet. Cara had not accidentally become my friend. She had not sat next to me by coincidence. She had known. From the very first moment. She had known exactly who I was. I needed to talk to someone who had known Cara before me. I went through my memory carefully, the way you go through a drawer. When you're looking for something specific, pulling everything out and setting it aside until you find it. Cara and I had met at work. Her life before that job was something she talked about, but always in general terms: college, a year abroad, a few jobs before this one, a group of friends she'd drifted from. She had never been specific. She had never volunteered last names. She had never introduced me to anyone from before. And now I was standing on the outside of that part of her life, looking in and realizing there were no doors. She had never left one open. I thought about college. We had both gone to large universities in the same state, but different cities. We had never attended the same school. I went back to the photo from New Year's Eve. The comments were sparse, just a few likes, no names tagged. I clicked on the profile of one commenter. It was private. I clicked on a second one. Also private. The third one was not. The third commenter had a name, I'll call her Jess, and her profile was partially public, and when I went to it and looked at her photos, I found something that made my throat close. Jess and Cara, in college. Multiple photos, across multiple years. They had been friends. Real friends, from the look of it. The kind of closeness you can see in pictures, the unself-conscious proximity, the inside joke expressions. And in one photo from what looked like a college formal event, in the background, slightly out of focus, Marcus. He was younger, clearly a student, and he was looking at Cara from across the room with an expression I couldn't fully read. At that resolution, I found Jess's contact information through a professional directory. She had a business listed. I debated for 30 minutes whether to reach out. And then I wrote a message. I told her I was trying to understand something important about a shared friend. I told her it was sensitive. I told her I was not trying to cause problems, but that I needed to know the truth. And I pressed send before I could talk myself out of it. Jess replied 4 hours later. She said, I've been wondering for years if someone was going to reach out to me about this. I'll tell you what I know, but there's more than you're probably expecting. I want to stop here for just a moment, because I know how this part of the story sounds from the outside. It sounds like the setup for a dramatic reveal, and if you're watching this channel regularly, you probably have a sense of where certain kinds of stories go. But I need you to sit with me in this part for a second. Because this, right here, this moment of standing at the edge of information you cannot unknow, this is the moment that changes a person. Not the confrontation. Not the fallout. This moment. The moment where you are still in the before. The moment where you could theoretically close the laptop and not call Jess back and decide the anonymous message was a lie. I thought about that. I thought about it seriously. I had a husband I loved. I had a life I had built. I had a friendship that had been, whatever its origins, the most meaningful relationship of my adult life. And I sat with the possibility of just not knowing. I sat with it for about 40 seconds. And then I called Jess. Jess and I talked for 2.5 hours. I am not going to give you every word of that conversation. But I am going to give you the parts that mattered. She told me that Cara and Marcus had been together for almost 2 years in college. Not a situationship. Not a casual thing. A real relationship, the kind that becomes part of who you are at that age, the kind that people around you think might be the one. She told me that Marcus had ended it. That he had been the one to end it. And that Cara had not taken it well. She didn't fall apart, Jess said. That's not how Cara works. She went very quiet, and then she got very focused. Focused. That word. I wrote it down. Jess told me that after the breakup, Cara had stayed in touch with people who knew Marcus. Casually. Naturally. The way someone maintains a general social network. Except that she paid particular attention to anyone connected to his life. Jess said she hadn't thought much of it at the time. Cara was social, Cara was warm, it seemed normal for her to maintain connections. It was only later, after everything, that Jess understood what Cara had been doing. She had been keeping watch. Not obsessively. Not in a way that would have looked alarming to anyone watching. Just attentively. She wanted to know where he was, Jess said, who he was with. Whether he was serious about anyone, she never said that directly. But looking back, everything she did was oriented around that information. I asked Jess about the goodbye photo. The 2 coffees. Jess was quiet for a moment. They had a conversation about a year after the breakup, she said. Marcus made it clear it was really over, that he had moved on. He wasn't unkind about it, from what I understand, but he was. Final. I asked what happened after that. Cara changed jobs, Jess said, a few months later. She changed jobs. To the firm where I worked. To the firm where I worked. I think I made a sound. I'm not sure what kind of sound it was. How did she know he would be connected to someone at that firm? I asked. Jess was quiet for a moment. Because Marcus had a friend there, she said, a close friend from college, someone who worked there for years, and Cara knew that Marcus visited him sometimes, that they got drinks near the office, that Marcus's social life had a gravitational pull in that direction. She was quiet again. She wasn't waiting for Marcus, Jess said. I don't think it was that simple. I think it was she wanted to be in his orbit. She wanted to be the person who knew things, and when you walked in, when you and Marcus started seeing each other, she was already there, I said. She was already there, Jess said. But that wasn't even the full picture. Because what Jess told me next, what she said almost as an afterthought, the way people sometimes bury the most important things inside other things. That changed everything I thought I knew about Cara's plan. Jess told me that Cara had not just positioned herself near Marcus's orbit. She had positioned herself near me specifically. Before Marcus and I had even met. I need you to hear that. Before Marcus and I had even met. Cara had known about me. Jess explained it slowly, carefully, as if she understood that I needed time to absorb each piece before the next one arrived. Marcus's friend at the firm, the one Cara had used as her compass point, had mentioned me to Marcus in passing. He had said something like, "There's a woman who just started here. You'd like her, she's sharp, she reminds me a little of you." He hadn't set us up. He hadn't arranged anything. He'd just made a comment. But Marcus had filed it away. And sometime after that comment was made, Marcus came to visit his friend at the office for drinks nearby. And Cara, who had been watching this social ecosystem for months, had been there. She had met Marcus that evening, in that casual way, in a group of people near the office. And Marcus, who had not seen Cara since that final coffee, who had moved on, who had built a life, was friendly. Normals. The way you are friendly with someone from your past when enough time has passed and enough distance has grown. And Cara had been introduced, briefly, casually, to me. "You know each other," I said to Jess. Not from that night, from what Cara told me afterward. She told me she had met the woman Marcus was eventually going to end up with. Those were her words, the woman he's going to end up with, and she said it like it was, I don't know, like it was a chess piece moving into position. A chess piece moving into position. I remembered the training session. I remembered the notebook. I remembered her sitting down next to me with that easy confidence, that naturalness, and saying, "That is the most organized notebook I have ever seen." It wasn't an accident. She had sat next to me on purpose. She had chosen me. Not Marcus. Mate. I asked Jess the question I had been circling since the beginning of our conversation. "Why?" I said. "What did she want?" And Jess took a breath. "I asked her that," Jess said, "once, after you and Marcus had been dating for a few months and it was clear things were serious. I asked her what she was doing, why she was so close to you, what the end game was." "What did she say?" I asked. "She said she just wanted to be there, to be present, to be the person who knew everything," she said, and this is a direct quote I have never forgotten it. She said, "I want to be the one she calls. When it falls apart, I want to be first." The room felt very far away. I want to be the one she calls when it falls apart. I want to be first. She thought it would fall apart, I said. She assumed it would, Jess said. She knew Marcus's patterns. She knew how he operated in relationships. She believed that whatever he had with you would eventually end the same way it had ended with her, and when it did, she would be there, close, trusted. She'd be the one you leaned on, and through you she'd still be connected to him. I asked Jess when she had last spoken to Cara. "A few months before your wedding," Jess said. I told her I didn't want to be part of it anymore. Whatever it was, it had stopped feeling like friendship a long time before that. And she accepted that. She said I didn't understand the whole picture, Jess said. She said something was going to happen, and when it did, I'd see that. She had been right about everything. Something was going to happen. I closed my eyes. I thought about the wedding. I thought about Cara standing next to me at the altar. Cara, who had helped me choose the dress. Cara, who had thrown the bridal shower. Cara, who had cried during the toast, actual tears running down her face while she talked about what our friendship meant to her. What she was to me. What she hoped I would always be to her. And the audience had cried with her. And I had cried. And Marcus had squeezed my hand. And I had thought, I am the luckiest person I know. I want to tell you that at this point in the story I was angry. I want to tell you I was outraged. But that would not be completely honest. What I felt, sitting in my kitchen with my phone still warm from 2.5 hours of conversation with a woman I'd never met. What I felt was grief. Pure, specific, unmistakable grief. The kind that arrives before the anger. The kind that lives underneath everything else. Because even knowing what I knew, even holding the full shape of the deception in my hands, I missed Cara. I missed who I had believed she was. I missed the friendship I had been living inside, even if it was a fiction. I had lost her twice in one day. Once because she turned out to be someone else. And once because I realized, standing in my kitchen looking at the coffee machine she had helped me pick out, that the person I missed had never existed at all. That is a very specific kind of loss. I don't have a word for it. I don't think there is one. There was one more thing. The last thing. The thing I found not through Jess, but through my own searching. 2 days later, at 2 in the morning when I should have been asleep. But instead was pulling at every thread I could find. After my conversation with Jess, I had started going back through every significant event of my relationship with Marcus, looking at it through the new lens. Every dinner Cara had attended. Every conversation where she'd offered advice about him. Every moment she had been present in the space between us. I had thought she was being a good friend. I had thought she was happy for me. I had thought the small comments she made sometimes, subtle things, gently placed, were just her being honest the way close friends are honest with each other. Things like, I worry sometimes that Marcus doesn't communicate the way you need him to. Did he say why he was working late again? Because that seemed like a lot last month. I just want to make sure you're seeing him clearly, not just who you want him to be. I had thought those were love. I had thought she was protecting me. What she was doing was planting seeds. Small, careful seeds, dropped at precisely chosen moments, in the specific fertile ground of a woman in love, who occasionally doubted herself. She was not trying to end the relationship. Not directly. Not in a way I would have noticed. She was building a slow, sustained doubt. The kind that doesn't announce itself. The kind that grows underground and surfaces, as your own thought. Not someone else's. She wanted me to eventually, someday, reach a moment of crisis in my marriage and turn to her. She wanted to be the one holding me when it happened. She wanted to be present when I was broken. She wanted to be first. And I found the proof of this intention, not in any conversation with Jess or anyone else. I found it in a document. A notes document. On a device I borrowed from Cara months before the wedding because my laptop was being repaired and I needed to finish a work project. Over a weekend, I was spending at her apartment. I had used her old tablet. She had lent it without hesitation. And I had done my work and handed it back and thought nothing of it. But I had linked my cloud storage account to it to transfer files. And the account had never been fully disconnected. So sitting at 2 in the morning, on a hunch I cannot entirely explain, I opened the cloud storage app on my phone. And I found a synced backup from her tablet, including a folder of notes documents, including one document that had no title. A document that was 37 pages long. A document that began with Marcus's name. I will not read you the whole thing. I will not. But I will tell you what it was. It was a record. Years and years of a record. Every interaction she had monitored. Every piece of information about Marcus she had collected. His schedule patterns. His friendships. His professional movements. Notes on his relationship history before me, people she had quietly researched. And then, after I entered the picture, notes about me. About us. About the things I had told her. The vulnerabilities I had shared. The fears I had about the relationship. The specific insecurities she had noted and labeled as, and I am. Quoting directly, leverage points. Leverage points. She had been documenting my insecurities as leverage points. The deepest, most private parts of me, the things I had told her. At midnight, the things I had trusted her with because she was my person had been filed and labeled and kept. Ready for whenever she needed them. The document ran up to 4 days before our wedding. The last entry was a single line. It said, "Whatever happens, I'll be there first." I closed the app. I set the phone down on the table. I looked at the wall for a very long time. And then I understood something about the next step. This was not a conversation I could have with Cara. Not yet. Not without preparation. Not without everything I needed. Because if Cara was anything, if she was the person that 37 pages of meticulous documentation suggested she was, then a direct confrontation without strategy was a confrontation I would lose. And I had no intention of losing this. I told Marcus before I told Cara. That was deliberate. I told him on a Thursday evening after dinner, when the dishes were done and the apartment was quiet. I sat down across from him at the kitchen table, and I put my phone face down between us and I said, "I need to talk to you about something and I need you to be completely honest with me." He sat up straight. He had the look of a person who already knows something is wrong, but hasn't located the wrongness yet. I told him what I knew. Not everything. Not the document. Not Jess. Not the 8 years of careful observation. Just the core of it. I told him that I knew Cara, and he had been in a relationship. That it had been serious. That she had known who he was when she became my friend. He was very still. He was so still that the kitchen felt like a photograph. And then he said, "How did you find out?" Not, "That's not true." Not, "I don't know what you're talking about." How did you find out? Which told me everything I needed to know about whether the anonymous message had been true. I said, "Does it matter how I found out?" He put his face in his hands. I watched him do it. I watched him sit there with his face in his hands, and I felt I want to be honest with you, I felt multiple things simultaneously. I felt rage. I felt something that was almost pity. I felt a cold, clarifying certainty that I had done the right thing. By finding out. He looked up. His eyes were wet. "It was years ago," he said. "Years before you, I didn't think it mattered, it was over." "When did it end?" I asked. He told me. The same timeline Jess had given me. "Did you know that she knew you when she became my friend?" I asked. He was quiet for a long moment. "I didn't know at first," he said, "when you first told me about your best friend Cara, I didn't connect it. The name is not that uncommon, I didn't think about it." "When did you connect it?" I asked. Another silence. "A few months into your friendship," he said. "She and I were at your work holiday party." She was across the room and I recognized her. I stared at him. "And you said nothing," I said. "I didn't know what to say," he said. "I thought it was done. It was years past. I didn't know why she was there if it was intentional. I thought maybe it was a coincidence. I didn't want to create a problem where there wasn't one." "You didn't want to create a problem," I said. "I want you to understand the quality of my voice in that moment. It was very quiet. It was very even. It was the voice of a person who has decided not to shout because shouting would not be sufficient. You watched your ex-girlfriend spend 8 years as my best friend. And you said nothing, I said. You watched her stand next to me. At our wedding, you watched her cry during the toast, and you said nothing. I thought she had moved on, he said. I thought we'd all moved on. I didn't know what she was, I didn't know she had. What? I said. He couldn't finish the sentence. Because he didn't fully know yet what she had done. I told him about the document. I told him about Jess. I told him about the leverage points. I watched his face change in real time as I spoke. The color left it. His jaw tightened. And by the time I was done, the man sitting across from me did not look like the man who had put his face in his hands 5 minutes ago. He looked like someone who had realized, for the first time, the full scope of something that had been happening around him for years. She was cataloging you, he said. She was cataloging me, I confirmed. He was quiet for a very long time. What do you want to do? He said. I want to talk to her, I said, but not yet, not until I know exactly what I'm going to say. Marcus nodded. He asked if we were okay. I told him the truth, I didn't know yet. I told him that my anger was not entirely about the past relationship. My anger was about the silence. About the years of watching and saying nothing. About allowing me to build my entire adult emotional life around a person he had known was not what she presented herself as. And choosing his own comfort over my right to know. He did not defend himself. He sat there and he accepted it. And I gave him credit for that. A small amount. In that moment. A small amount. But the conversation with Marcus, as difficult as it was, as necessary as it was only the second most important conversation I had that week. The most important one was the one I had with Cara. And I planned it for 11 days. 11 days of preparation. 11 days of assembling everything I needed. 11 days of deciding exactly who I was going to be in that room. I invited her for dinner. At my apartment. Marcus was not there. I had asked him to stay with his friend for the night. I made her favorite meal. I set the table carefully. I lit a candle. When she walked in, she did what she always did. She came in warm. She filled the room with her presence. She hugged me, she looked around and said the apartment was starting to really feel like home. She sat down at the table. I poured wine. I sat across from her. And for about 20 minutes, I let it be a normal dinner. I wanted to see her comfortable. I wanted to see her at ease. Because what I was about to do required that she be completely unprepared. We talked about work. We talked about a trip we'd vaguely mentioned taking together. We talked about a show we were both watching. And then I set down my fork. And I said, "Can I ask you something?" She looked at me across the table. Warm, open, present. Of course, she said. How long were you and Marcus together? I said. The warmth didn't leave her face. That is the thing I have never forgot. The warmth did not leave her face. She tilted her head slightly. What? She said. You and Marcus, I said, your relationship before you became my friend, how long did it last? The tilt of her head corrected itself. Very slowly. Like a ship finding its course again. I don't know what you mean, she said. Yes, you do, I said. And I told her what I knew. Plainly. Without dramatics. Without emotion in my voice, or at least without the emotion showing. I told her about the photos. I told her about Jess. I told her about the timeline. About the deliberate choice of employer. About the way she had sat down next to me. I watched her face as I spoke. It was extraordinary. She didn't deny immediately. She was calculating. I could see it happening. She was running through what I knew and what I didn't know and where the gaps were and how to use them. She was doing it right in front of me. And that visible calculation, that was what made it real. In a way, the photos and the document had not fully made it real. Because she wasn't shocked. She wasn't hurt. She was tactical. We dated briefly in college, she said finally. It wasn't serious. I didn't think it was relevant when we became friends. By then it was years in the past. 2 years isn't brief, I said. It felt casual at the time, she said. Jess says it wasn't. The first crack. Barely visible. Jess doesn't know everything, she said. No, I said, but she knows enough. And then I put my phone on the table between us. The same way I had put it on the table between Marcus and me. But this time, the phone was open to the document. To the folder. To the synced backup. To the 37 pages. I watched her look at it. I watched her understand what she was seeing. And for the first time, the very first time in the entire dinner, her face did something real. It went white. That's private, she said. Yes, I said, a lot of things should be private, my fears about my relationship, for example, my insecurities, the things I told you in confidence, they should have been private, you label. Leverage points. She opened her mouth. She closed it. Why, I said. Just that. Just the one word. And she looked at me across the table, across the candle and the wine and the meal I had made for her, and she said something I was not expecting. She said, because I loved him. I let that sit. You loved him, I said. I loved him and he ended it, she said. He ended it and moved on. And I couldn't, I tried to move on and I couldn't, and then I found out he was going to meet you and I needed to be there. I needed to be close. I needed to understand what he was going to have that he didn't think I could give him. Her voice cracked. Her eyes filled. And I want to be honest with you. I felt something. I am not a stone. I felt a version of sadness for the person in front of me who had clearly been carrying something very heavy for a very long time. But then I thought about leverage points. And the sadness went somewhere, it couldn't interfere with anything. You spent 8 years with me, I said, 8 years of my life. My most personal moments, my worst days, my fears, you were there. For all of it, and you were keeping records. I cared about you, she said. Genuinely, what we had was real. It wasn't built on anything real, I said. It was built on access. It was built on proximity to him, the moment it stopped serving that purpose, it would have ended. That's not true, she said. The document says otherwise, I said. She had no answer for that. I said, the last entry is from 4 days before my wedding. Whatever happens, I'll be there first. What does that mean, Cara? What were you expecting to happen? She looked down at the table. I thought he would eventually hurt you the way he hurt me, she said very quietly. And you wanted to be there when he did. I wanted to be there for you, she said. I know how that sounds. But I wanted to be there for you. You wanted to be first, I said. Your word. She didn't deny it. We sat in silence for what felt like a very long time. I'm going to ask you to leave now, I said. She looked up. I'm not calling the police. I'm not going to your employer. I'm not going to post this publicly, but I am done. this is done, everything. Between us, it's done. She stood slowly. She looked at me with an expression I have never been able to fully interpret, and do not think I will ever fully interpret. She said, "I'm sorry." I said nothing. She picked up her bag. She walked to the door. She stopped with her hand on the door handle. "For what it's worth," she said without turning around, "the friendship was real, whatever you believe about the rest of it. The friendship was real." And then she left. I sat at that table for a long time after she left. The candle burned down. The wine went warm. I didn't move. I thought about 8 years. I thought about every version of the story I was now going to have to carry. The version where the friendship was real and the foundation was wrought. The version where I had been used and also loved. The version where Cara was a villain and also a person in tremendous unresolved pain. Those things can all be true simultaneously. I have learned that they are not comfortable together, but they can be simultaneously true. Marcus came home at midnight. He found me at the table. He didn't say anything. He sat down next to me. He put his hand on the table, not on mine, just near. An offering. I put my hand on his. And we sat there together in the quiet for a long time. In the weeks that followed, several things happened. I am going to tell you about all of them, because I think honesty requires not just the dramatic confrontation, but the long, unglamorous, complicated aftermath that nobody shows. UN movies. The first thing, I deleted every photo of Cara and me from my phone. Not because I was performing an unburdening. Not because it felt cathartic. I deleted them because I could not look at them without trying to locate the lie inside each one. And that exercise was making me someone I didn't want to be. Someone who examines every smile for ulterior motive. Someone who looks at joy and sees performance. So I deleted them. Not to erase the years. Just to stop picking at something that was trying to close. The second thing, Marcus and I entered couples therapy. This was not a dramatic decision. It was a practical one. He had known. He had stayed quiet. And that, whatever his reasons, whatever the complexity of it, had been a choice that affected me profoundly. We needed a third party in the room for certain conversations. Someone who could hold the space while I said things that needed to be said, and while he heard them without the conversation collapsing into something we couldn't come back from. We went every week for 7 months. It was not easy. There were sessions where I left feeling worse than when I arrived. There were sessions where Marcus said things that broke something open in me that I hadn't known was closed. There were sessions where we sat in silence so long the therapist had to gently check that we were both still breathing. But we went. Every week. For 7 months. And I think that decision, the willingness to stay in the discomfort long enough to understand it, is the thing I am most proud of. In this entire story. Not the confrontation. Not the investigation. The willingness to sit in the room. The third thing, I heard from Cara once more. A letter. Paper in an envelope, mailed to the apartment. 7 pages handwritten. I read the first 2 pages, and then I put it in a drawer. I did not read the rest. Not because I was afraid of what it said, but because I understood, holding those pages, that reading them was for her, not for me. She needed to have said it. I did not need to have heard it. I still have the letter in the drawer. I have not opened it again. I don't know if I ever will. And I have made peace with the fact that not knowing whether I will is okay. Not every question needs an answer. Not every drawer needs to be opened. The fourth thing, I thought about the anonymous message. I thought about it a lot. I never found out who sent it. I have my suspicions. I believe it was Jess. I believe that Jess, having distanced herself from Cara, having watched from the outside as Cara stood at my wedding and gave that toast, I believe Jess made a decision. I have never asked her directly. She has never confirmed or denied it. But if it was her, I am grateful. Whatever the complexity of gratitude in this kind of situation, I am grateful. People ask me sometimes, when I tell pieces of this story in real life, in the careful abbreviated version I share with people I trust, they ask me what the lesson is, what I take from it, what I think it means. And I used to find that question difficult. Because it felt too tidy. It felt like it was asking me to package something jagged into something smooth, to find the instructive moral at the center of something that was fundamentally painful and complicated, and resistant to morals. But I have been living with this story long enough now that I have found not a lesson exactly, but a few things that are true. The first thing that is true. Trust is not just a feeling. It is a practice, and like all practices, it can be approached deliberately or unconsciously. I had given my trust to Cara unconsciously, instinctively, because she felt like safety, because she showed up, because she remembered the things I told her. And none of those things are bad reasons to trust someone. But I had trusted her completely, without incrementally, without ever checking, without ever asking the kinds of questions that feel rude when you ask them of someone who seems warm. I am not saying we should treat friendships like background checks. I am not saying warmth is suspicious. I am saying that for me, and I can only speak for me, I had never learned how to trust slowly. How to be present and open and available and still hold just enough of myself back, just enough to check. To notice the stillness. To ask what it meant. I am learning that now. Slowly. Imperfectly. But learning. The second thing that is true. People who are in pain do things that cause pain. This is not an excuse. Cara's choices were her choices. The records she kept, the seeds she planted, the years she moved through my life with a private agenda, those were deliberate choices. Made by an adult who knew what she was doing. I do not excuse them. I do not forgive them, not yet, and possibly not ever. But I understand them as something a human being in genuine anguish. Built over many years, as a way of managing an unresolved loss. That doesn't make them okay. It makes them comprehensible. And comprehending something, even something that hurt you, takes less out of you than spending your life refusing to understand it. The third thing that is true. Marcus and I are still together. I know some of you may have questions about that. I know that for some people, the decision to stay would be the unacceptable part of this story. I understand that. I do not need anyone to agree with it. But I made the decision I made with full information, with 7 months of therapy, with my eyes open. He was not an active participant in what Cara did. He was a passive one. He made a choice I wish he had made differently. He has owned that choice, completely, in the way I needed him to. And we are as different than we were before. Not worse. Different. There is a version of our marriage that did not go through this. That marriage was softer. Easier. More comfortable. This version is something else. Something that has been tested and is still standing. I do not romanticize that. It is what it is. And it is, for now, enough. The thing I return to most often is not the document. Not the leverage points. Not the confrontation. It is what Cara said as she stood at my door. The friendship was real, whatever you believe about the rest. The friendship was real. I have turned those words over and over. I have examined them from every angle. And I have arrived at a conclusion that I find genuinely complex. I believe her. I believe that what she felt for me, whatever its origins, whatever its distortions, was real in some form. I believe that a person can use you and love you simultaneously. I believe that Cara, who had organized her emotional life around proximity to a man who had left her, who had built a friendship on an architecture of need, I believe that somewhere inside that architecture, she had actually come to need me. Not just as a means to an end, but as a person. And that is the part that is hardest to sit with. Not the betrayal. The grief. The grief of understanding that a love built on a rotten foundation is still a love. That something can be both true and broken. That the warmth was real even as the motive was not. I don't know what to do with that. I am not sure anyone does. But I have decided to hold it without resolving it. Because some things are not meant to be resolved. Some things are meant to be carried differently over time. More easily eventually. But still carried. I am still in the same city. I passed Cara on the street once, about 8 months ago. We saw each other at the same moment. We held each other's gaze for perhaps 2 seconds. And then we both looked away and kept walking. And that was it. That was the whole of it. No scene. No words. Just two people who once knew everything about each other, moving through the same city in opposite directions. Marcus saw me when I got home that evening. He asked if I was okay. I told him about passing Cara. He looked at me for a moment. And then he said, "How do you feel?" And I thought about it, honestly, before I answered. Lighter than I expected, I said. And that was true. Lighter than I expected. I have been lighter ever since. Not light. Lighter. There is a difference. I want to leave you with a question. Not a lesson. Not a conclusion. Just a question. Because I think it is the question underneath all of this. Underneath all the stories like this one. The question is, how much do you actually know about the people closest to you? Not what they've told you about themselves. What you know. What you have tested. What has been confirmed not by their warmth or their consistency, but by the moments, the real, unguarded, pressured moments. When the warmth doesn't get a chance to perform. When the person behind the person shows up. I thought I knew Cara. I knew the version she chose to show me. They are not the same thing. And I wonder sometimes, in quiet moments, when I am feeling honest with myself, how many of us are showing one version and hiding another. Not out of malice. Not always. But out of the very human need to be seen the way we want to be seen. Rather than the way we are. I don't think that makes people villains. I think it makes us all, to varying degrees, curators of ourselves. And I think the bravest thing a person can do is put down the curation long enough to let someone actually see. I have been trying to do that. With Marcus. With the people I let in slowly now. With myself. It is harder than it sounds. But it is the only way I know how to make sure that what is built between people is real. All the way down. Down to the foundation. Down to the ground. I am on my way there. And if you have a story like this one, if you have lived inside something like this, I want to know. Tell me in the comments. Not because misery loves company, but because some stories deserve to be heard. And because sometimes the most important thing is simply to know. You are not the only one. Thank you for being here. This is Shattered Loyalties. And I will see you next time.